Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. This is Jim Inkster, your moderator, and Governor John Bel Edwards is in the house. Again, your number is 877-217-5757. Also joining us is Chip Klein. He is the chair of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, and he directs coastal activities for the governor. And there was a hurricane that went through our state over the weekend, and we'll talk about that. But there is much to discuss. And before we go anywhere else, Governor, the whole world is commenting on the president's tweets this week, and there was a vote in Congress last night, and all Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives voted in favor of condemning the president's remarks. 4 Republicans also did, and our delegation, largely dominated by GOP members, 5 members voted against the condemnation, and the 1 Democrat voted for it. What's your take?
Well, you know, I've been saying for literally years that the political discourse in this country has turned toxic, and it's anything but civil, and it really doesn't lend itself to the kind of conversations that we need to have that actually develop consensus and unity and allow folks to get together and actually govern effectively. And I think this is just the latest example of that. And obviously, I believe the president's remarks by tweet were out of bounds. And we ought to all aspire to do better than that, quite frankly, you know. And I think it's incumbent on all of us, and certainly I'm mindful of that as governor, that we need to have the most civil political discourse that we can. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've been able to come together here in Louisiana, despite party differences, and actually tackle big challenges and move our state forward and put ourselves in a better position. And I really hope that will happen in Washington as well.
The president, as we know, speaks his mind, but when somebody says to go back from where you came, that has meanings that go way beyond that particular statement. Does that statement give you pause?
Well, it does. And you know, the president has said he didn't intend for it to be a racist statement. But for the people who are listening, and certainly the people who are targeted, you can compare that statement with statements that were made during the Civil Rights Movement, for example, and that were directed at people who sat at lunch counters that they weren't supposed to sit at, or wanted to ride the bus wherever they wanted to sit, or wanted to register to vote. And very similar comments were made then. And so it's unfortunate. We really ought to do better. And look, I think it's perfectly appropriate to express policy differences. And that's normal. We should be doing that. In fact, you can't overcome the differences unless you acknowledge them. But we ought not be getting personal about things, you know, like the president tweeted. And by the way, you know, there are examples all the time on both sides of discourse that's less than what we ought to be modeling to our children and what's conducive to good governance. And we need to move forward and get past this. And you know, I'm concerned that if we don't sort of lower the heat, back down the rhetoric, that it's going to become impossible for the folks in Washington to govern effectively. And they haven't been hitting on all cylinders to begin with.
Well, one of your opponents has doubled down on this and said he would actually pay the way for the 4 congresswomen who were under attack by the president to leave the country. That's a statement that is gaining a lot of attention. Maybe that was by design, but is that within the bounds of good politics, or is it beyond the pale?
Well, look, it's beyond the pale, and whether it's good politics, I guess we'll know in time. That's certainly not the way I would conduct myself, something that I would say, and you know, that's very unfortunate. And as you know, I've been very busy with the tropical storm and then Hurricane Barry. I had not heard what you just said, to be honest, but that's very, very unfortunate. And Louisianans are better than that, and hopefully they will demand better than that of their governor.
Well, and as we segue to Hurricane Barry, you were dealing with that, as was much of the state. It turned out to be a lesser storm than anticipated, thank goodness, but you always have to prepare for the worst. And even though it was not a Gustav or Katrina moment, it still was a significant happening. How did the state come through it?
Well, the state did really well, and we're just now getting out and doing the preliminary damage assessments around the state to try to figure out what additional assistance we might qualify for. I feel really good that public assistance is forthcoming. Individual assistance, that's going to be very difficult to meet the burdens necessary to show that we're entitled to that. But we're out working across the state. And it's true, we did not get the rain that was forecasted. And oddly enough, we're quite certain the rain did fall. It just fell over the Gulf. And my last conversation with the folks at the National Weather Service, they were still looking for that scientific meteorological reason for why that happened, because that wasn't what they forecasted.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, and this was pretty consistent theme throughout the storm, the rain bands formed in the Gulf. They were circulating, as they always do, counterclockwise, and they would be red and yellow. But when they got over land, they turned to light green, which means they really dried up for the most part. And I mean, we had parts of the state that got 14 inches of rain, but we didn't get up to 20 inches of rain all across South Louisiana, which is what we'd been told. So I'm thankful for that. But by the way, we did get significant storm surge, and that's one of the reasons I wanted Chip Klein to come in today, because the storm surge, especially in southeast Louisiana, was probably heavier than we had been told to expect, and it was about what we were told to expect in central Louisiana. But you know, we have the most comprehensive and complex set of levees and locks and pumps anywhere in the country. And anytime you have significant storm surge, and you've got to figure out what their effectiveness was, how they performed. And he's been working on that since the storm, and thought we'd bring him in today in case you had questions for him and so forth.
The state, of course, has coastal issues that would be in place if there were no hurricanes, but this always exacerbates the situation. What's going on, Chip?
Well, Jim, first of all, I think it's important for your listeners to know that since 2005, since the hurricanes of 2005, and particularly since 2007, when the first coastal master plan was developed, the state of Louisiana has made tremendous progress in addressing the issues of coastal restoration and hurricane protection. And specifically, the state has created over 52,000 acres of land. We've built over 60 miles of barrier islands, and we've built over 300 miles of coastal levees. So 300 miles, to put that into perspective, is about the distance between Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Destin, Florida. So when your listeners are going on vacation this summer, you need to be thinking about that, how many miles of levee that actually is. But particularly under this administration, over $2.4 billion has been allocated to hurricane protection and coastal restoration projects across our coast, which will create about 16,000 acres of land and provide about 20 miles of levees across our coast. So I think we're making tremendous progress here, but I think Governor Edwards' administration is not an administration that's simply going to talk about this issue. We're not just going to study it. We're actually going to build the projects that will protect the overwhelming majority of our citizens, as well as restore our natural environment. But I think that, over the last few days, Hurricane Barry really showed us the investment that we made across our coast over the last several years has really paid off. Because if you look in the areas of Terrebonne Parish, where you had two segments of levees that were overtopped, they didn't fail, they weren't breached, they were simply overtopped, and the two segments that were overtopped were construction sites, were active construction sites where the state of Louisiana and local parishes were actually raising those levees. So if we were not in a position to where you could see the level of protection that has been afforded to the residents of coastal Louisiana, particularly in Terrebonne Parish, where the two segments of levees that I'm referencing were in Dularge and in Montague. Mm-hmm. You're talking about 3,700 people living in those communities. And if those levees had not been provided under this administration, under Governor Edwards' administration, you would have had close to 4,000 people's homes who were underwater. So I think for the most part, the hurricane protection systems across coastal Louisiana perform just as we hoped they would, particularly the hurricane risk reduction system around the greater New Orleans area.
Thank you, Chip Klein. And if you have a question for Chip or the governor, 877-217-5757. We've had some people holding for a little while, and if you get a busy signal, please be patient. We'll do our best to get you in before the close of the hour. We start with Clarice in Lafayette. Clarice, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. We all know about Hurricane Barry, and first off, I'd like to congratulate the governor and his entire staff. I thought the preparation and everything was wonderful. Y'all did an awesome job. But what I wanted to ask was, since you kicked off your statewide tour in your RV and you didn't get a chance to get around everywhere due to the hurricane, what would you have liked to have said to those people that you didn't get a chance to speak with?
Clarice, thank you very much for the call. And I'll tell you, the preparation that went into getting ready for the hurricane and then the immediate response to it was a tremendous effort. And I want to, again, thank the National Guard, the State Police, Wildlife and Fisheries, Fire Marshal's Office, Chip Klein and the whole team at CPRA, and also our local partners. We got the first couple of days in on the tour, and then I had to cancel the rest to get back to Baton Rouge to do a unified command group meeting in preparation for Barry that obviously came ashore over the weekend. Look, at the end of the day, my pitch to the people of Louisiana is that it's what they already know, and that is our state is much stronger. We're much better off than we were in 2015 in terms of having a record budget deficit that exceeded $2 billion when I walked into office, working with the legislature. We've turned that around. We're running small surpluses. We're making strategic new investments in higher education for the first time in 10 years, teacher pay raises for the first time in 10 years. We also invested money in early childhood. So education is the key to opportunity and prosperity. We're moving in that direction in Louisiana. But as it relates to the percentage of people without health insurance being at an all-time low, the economy is bigger than it's ever been. We still have challenges in Louisiana, but we're much, much better off. And that's the message that I have for everybody across Louisiana. And I hate that I wasn't able to complete that tour, but I do look forward to getting back out there to every corner of the state and having that conversation.
Josh in Shreveport. Josh, you're on with Governor Edwards and Chip Klein. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Governor Edwards, and thank you, Mr. Klein, for taking the time to answer my question today. I'm a 26-year-old in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I graduated college not too long ago. I've noticed a lot of my friends moving to different parts of the country to find jobs. And I was just wondering, is there anything that we're doing or anything that we can do or anything we can do better at to make sure that young people are getting the skills and the skill set that they need to go out and find a job here in Louisiana?
Josh, thank you very much for the call. And absolutely, there's some things we're doing. There's obviously some things we can do better, but both of those I'd have to answer in the affirmative. When I meet with the CEO of a company and he or she is looking to invest in Louisiana, either to expand their current operation or to create a new presence here, the question that I get first, and the most important one, is Louisiana committed to the talent pipeline that they need to be successful? Will they have the access to educated, skilled, trained workers? And that is why we made an absolute commitment in 2016 to fund higher education. It had been cut more than any other state in the nation over the previous 8 years. And so we weren't inspiring that confidence. We stabilized higher ed right away. We have a net new investment in higher ed now for the first time in 10 years. And by the way, I think it's the reason we've been able to land 161 major economic development project wins over the last 3.5 years, more than $39 billion in new investment, about 34,000 new jobs created. And we still have a ways to go. As I was telling Clarice in the previous question, we still have challenges, but our state is much, much better off. And in particular, in Shreveport area, we're investing heavily in the hospital, the medical school, but also in the field of cybersecurity with the Cyber Innovation Center that we have up there. And in fact, we're promoting the I-20 corridor as the cyber corridor in Louisiana with a lot of work that we're doing with Louisiana Tech that has the first cyber engineering degree in the program. Grambling State University just added a degree in cybersecurity. So we're making strategic investments, and in Louisiana, in North Louisiana, I meant to say, we recently had a major win when Centurylink decided to retain its headquarters in Monroe, in Louisiana, the largest headquarters we have in terms of the largest corporate headquarters in Louisiana will be in Monroe through 2025. So we're working very hard, and I appreciate the fact that you're in Shreveport, and I want to make sure that you and everyone else has opportunity right here in Louisiana.
Jim in Crowley, you're on Ask the Governor. Good afternoon, Jim.
Hi, thank you for taking the time, and hello, Governor.
Thank you,
given
Jim.
the recent discovery of racist letters, do you think LSU should rename its Middleton Library?
The
Jim,
Troy Middleton letters to the then president of the University of Texas saying that he would basically keep LSU all white, a letter he wrote in 1961. Now, Troy Middleton, by the way, served more combat days than any general in U.S. history. He was president of LSU, distinguished American, fought in World War I and World War II, hero of Battle of the Bulge. But he was a man of his time, and that time was a time of segregation. Does that mean his name should come off the library?
Okay, and I appreciate you, Jim, for providing the context of Jim's question. And Jim, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to hear the question. Look, I haven't seen the letter, I don't think, but obviously I'm very thankful that in the 60 years or so, almost 60 years since that letter would have been written, that LSU and the state of Louisiana are so far past that sentiment that was expressed in that letter. Because if you look at LSU now, we have record enrollments in terms of the diversity, not only of the freshman classes, but as we graduate each class, just about every year, we have a new record that we're setting in terms of African American students who are graduating. If you look at the sports programs, and if you look at all the other programs we have at LSU and higher ed around the state, obviously we're in a much, much better place. I guess I would want to look at the letter itself before I comment on whether the name should be taken from the library. And in the meantime, I would entrust that decision to the LSU Board of Supervisors. It's just not something that I've had an opportunity to really consider in the context of the letter that you just referenced.
Well, General Middleton, he was the real deal when it came to his career, and he was so well respected, Governor, that when the West Point football team was involved in a cheating scandal, he was the guy who did the investigation while he was at LSU.
I didn't know that either. Jim, you're just a walking encyclopedia.
That's right. And then he lost a coach to West Point, and Paul Dietzel, who went back to where he came. 877-217-5757 is your number. Ross in New Orleans. Hi, Ross. You're on with Governor Edwards and Chip Klein.
Yes, hello, Governor.
Hi, Ross.
I want to start by saying that I support you and I admire you, but I have one major serious complaint.
Okay, give it to me.
As you know, medical marijuana was legalized in this state more than 2 years ago, but it still isn't available through a doctor's prescription. And to be frank, when you're asked about this unacceptable delay, my impression is you come up with weak excuses or put the blame on others.
Ross, thank you for the call. Well, I'm not trying to offer weak excuses or deflect blame. I know that when the legislature created medical marijuana, there was a regulatory scheme that was put into place, and it involves the Commissioner of Agriculture on the one hand, the LSU and Southern Ag Centers on another. We also have the Pharmacy Board and the Board of Medical Examiners, all of which fit into a regulatory scheme. I will tell you that I, too, am very disappointed because it was my understanding that under the worst-case scenario, that the product would be available for patients upon the prescription of the doctor months ago. And obviously it's not. And in my most recent conversations, I think most of the problems have been ironed out in terms of getting it done moving forward. But I, too, am frustrated because I've supported medical marijuana both as a legislator, and then I've signed at least one bill and maybe two as governor. working with Fred Mills, who authored most of that legislation, a good state senator out of St. Martin Parish. So I share your frustrations, and I'm not trying to deflect any blame or criticism.
Let's go to Will in Baton Rouge. Will, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hey, how's it going? How's it going, Governor?
Hi, Will. Doing fine. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you if you support the Trump administration's efforts to deport illegal immigrants who have outstanding deportation orders.
Well, first of all, I do believe that we need to have laws that are enforced, and I do distinguish between those who actually have deportation orders, and I think that was your question, and those who do not. From the perspective that due process that is afforded them under our legal system has already taken place, and if there's a deportation order in place, then it seems to me like if you're going to be a nation of laws and not of men, that you've got to enforce those laws. And so the answer to the question is yes.
877-217-5757. Linda in New Orleans has been waiting patiently. Thank you, Linda. You're on the air with the governor.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call. Governor, what I would like to know, and it's sort of a two-parter, what do you see as your biggest accomplishment as governor, and what's the biggest thing left for you to do in the second term?
Linda, thank you very much for the question. The answer for me was the decision I made the first day as governor to expand Medicaid. Today, we've got about 455,000 working poor people in Louisiana with health insurance who didn't have it before. It's one of the ways we addressed that $2 billion budget deficit that I inherited because we saved about $300 million from simply bringing our tax dollars home. The uninsured rate has been cut by more than half. People have access to primary care and preventive care, and they're healthier. They're more productive. They're going to stay in the workforce longer, and many of them get a chance to live. And we also haven't had a single rural hospital close in Louisiana, unlike other states that did not expand Medicaid. So I think it was the right thing to do for all of those reasons. The primary objective, the number one goal for me in the second term has to do with early childhood education, having a much more robust system of funding slots in high-quality early childhood education for kids who are 0 to 3, and fully funding the 4-year-old slots as well. I also believe in terms of the things that are unfinished, that we need to raise the minimum wage, $7.25 since 2009. That's inadequate. I think we need to close the gender pay gap too, the largest in the country. We've been bringing bills every year. We've not been successful in moving those bills through the legislature, but we're going to keep working on it.
Alex in Jonesville. Hello, Alex. You're on the air with Governor Edwards. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Governor Edwards. How are you doing?
Alex, I'm doing well. Thank you so much.
All right, good. I have a question for you. Representative Ocasio-Cortez said America is running concentration camps at the border 2 weeks ago. ICE just recently opened up multiple new concentration camps right here in Louisiana. Why are you allowing this?
Okay, Alex, I don't get the premise of your question. Why am I allowing?
He said ISIS was opening concentration camps.
I just can't answer a question like that. I don't understand the premise of it. I don't think it's factually accurate, and I'm just not going to comment on it.
Owen in New Orleans. Hello, Owen. Thank you, Alex. Owen, you're on the air with Governor Edwards.
Hey, Governor.
Hi, Owen.
My question for you today is, as you've joined the trend across the southern part of our nation in passing legislation to restrict access to abortion, how you would plan to directly address the poor maternal child health outcomes, high rates of child poverty in our state.
Well, first of all, Owen, we are working very hard on those things. One thing ties into the Medicaid expansion, where we actually have about 290,000 women on health insurance who didn't have it before. And obviously the goal there is to improve health outcomes, not just for those women, but for everybody on Medicaid expansion. And then certainly we have the third lowest rate, I should say, of uninsured children in the country, behind only Massachusetts and Rhode Island because of the CHIP program that we run. And so we're obviously doing what we can to promote health there as well. And I'll tell you, Dr. Gee at LDH, working with all of the hospitals in the state, has new initiatives around maternal health as well. And so we're rolling out that program as we speak. And in fact, it's already making significant progress around the state of Louisiana. But I appreciate your question.
On a matter we haven't discussed, a civil rights leader well known in Baton Rouge and in some parts of Louisiana, Sadie Roberts Joseph, was brutally killed this week. Her body was found earlier in the week, and a person was arrested yesterday. And Governor, I know you knew Sadie Roberts Joseph, and it's certainly a tragedy of immense proportion.
Yeah, she was just a tremendous leader in the community, and I remember having a long conversation with her on Martin Luther King Day back in 2017 at Mount Zion, the historic church here in Baton Rouge. Had a great conversation with her, and when I heard the news that she had been killed, I mean, it just broke my heart, just like it did for many, many people here in Louisiana and elsewhere, by the way, and very tragic. And the more I learn about that particular crime, the it's just completely nonsense as to why that happened, and very brutal in the way that it did happen. And certainly our prayers continue to go out to her family and all of her friends.
Now, this is an issue that's been around for several administrations, but our state is on a per capita basis the deadliest in the country when it comes to homicides. Is there a simple answer why, or is it a complex issue?
I don't know if there's a simple answer why. I do know that that obviously there's too much violence, there's too much gun violence, and too many deaths. We actually made significant progress in 2018 in the number of murders in Louisiana. For example, in New Orleans, which typically gets the most attention with respect to that, the lowest number of murders since 1971. And we know that there were double-digit decreases in Shreveport and Baton Rouge and Monroe. I think we're on pace for 2019 to be similar to 2018, but there's just too much crime, and we're going to continue to work to make Louisiana a safe place to live and to work and to visit, and we obviously have a ways to go.
Dusty in Baton Rouge. Hi, Dusty. You're on the air with Governor Edwards and with Chip Klein. Hi, Dusty.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you, Governor, for everything you've done.
All right. Dusty, you're back.
Flood.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you now.
Okay. My question right now is that I had asked Restore Louisiana on what amount, which income, was it from my 2016 income tax, 2017 income tax that was used to calculate my AMI on the report that they gave me.
All right, hold tight. Don't go anywhere, Dusty. But Governor?
Yeah, Dusty, do hold tight, because what I need to do is get your name and your number, and if you know it, your Restore file number, claim number, so that I can have someone call you. Obviously, I wouldn't have the particular information that you seek, but hang on, and we're gonna get that information from you whenever I get finished speaking. But I did want to give a Restore update because based on guidance that we did get recently out of HUD around the duplication of benefits, we have about 242 applicants who really don't have to do anything with respect to their Restore claim, but we're going to be sending, in fact, have sent an additional check out to 202 of them. 40 more we're working with to try to make sure that whatever issue they have in their file, it gets cleared up so that we can get them a check. And then there's another 1,620 who've not closed yet, and so we're contacting them because we believe that's another 1,620. But altogether, it's another $38 million or so worth of assistance that we can get to homeowners because of this most recent action that HUD took to interpret and apply a change in the statute that Congress passed several months ago. So we do have some movement there, and I did want to make sure that people know. And by the way, if you're one of the homeowners who are entitled now to some additional relief based on the duplication of benefits changes, you will be contacted by the Restore program. But if you have questions, you can call Restore at 866-735-2001, or you can go to restore.la.gov.
And we're about to go to another break, but Chip Klein, earlier you talked about how the state is doing its best in a brave effort to restore the coast. But we've lost about the size of Delaware over the last many years. It's not going to be an easy process, is it?
It's not. I mean, if you look at the fact that, since the 1930s, we've lost over 2,000 square miles of land. And so it's quite the daunting task ahead of us. But, there are several priorities in this state that we need to focus on, from healthcare, economic developments, ports and maritime. Those things are all important, but they're worth nothing if they're underwater. And that's why this issue has got to be at the forefront of state government for the next several years.
The earlier caller asked about declarations in a state of emergency, and Governor, what happens in a particular locality when a disaster declaration is issued?
Well, it depends on whether it's a parish declaration, state declaration, or a federal declaration, but they're all important. One thing I wanted to make sure that we were able to cover today is on Monday we requested that the federal government add 6 parishes to the declaration of emergency that had previously been granted upon my request by President Trump. By the way, I continue to appreciate the fact that he did that within a few hours of us making the request. But those parishes are Allen, Beauregard, Catahoula, Concordia, Evangeline, and Vernon. I believe we're going to be successful, but as of now, we haven't received a word from FEMA that they have been added. I will tell you, on Monday, when nobody else was getting rain in Louisiana, there was a line that extended from northern Calcasieu Parish in the southwest Louisiana up to about Concordia Parish, but Allen and Evangeline and Avoyelles, they really got a lot of rain. Northern Calcasieu got a lot of rain, and I think up to 14 inches. And so we may have had as many homes take water on Monday as we did previously with Barry, and we're still working on that and doing the public damage assessments. But right now it looks like, because you have to spend a certain amount of money per capita, and it's about $6.5 million total, and then the federal government will reimburse 75 cents on the dollar for those expenditures. I think we're going to make that, both as a state and local government, and so the public assistance, we're doing the assessments now. It doesn't appear right now that there will be an awful lot of, if any, of individual assistance where the federal government makes additional benefits in financing available to individual homeowners and claimants. But we're working through that as well.
And Chip Klein, some new strategies were involved this past week with Barry. How did they work as far as hurricane protection?
So Jim, this was the first hurricane that we've had across South Louisiana where the hurricane risk reduction system around the greater New Orleans area was completely closed. So we had every single floodgate within the system closed. We operated the Western Closure Complex, which is the largest pump station in the world, as well as those 3 permanent pump stations along Lake Pontchartrain, which was the last component of the hurricane risk reduction system to be completed around the city of New Orleans. So I think it was quite comforting to see that system perform as we hoped it would. All of the different components worked in conjunction with one another that kept that the city of New Orleans largely protected from any storm surge and rainfall as a result of Hurricane Barry.
Frida in Mandeville. Hi, Frida. You're on the air.
Thank you.
What's your question,
Hello,
Frida?
Governor. Thank you for all that you've been doing for the people in Louisiana since you've become a governor.
Thank you, Frida.
And I hope you keep up the good job.
Yes,
and I would like to ask if you could kindly look into the conditions at the Madison Parish Correctional Center in Tallulah. They do not have enough showers, maybe 2 showers for 120 inmates, and they do not have regular educational classes.
All right. Thank you, Frida.
Frida, thank you. Stay on, because I'd like you to give us your name and number, too, so we can contact you back. But I certainly will take a look at that. And I'll tell you, one of the key things that we're working on right now in Louisiana is our criminal justice reinvestment. And the certified savings up to this point, since our criminal justice reinvestment act was passed and signed into law, in fact, it was 10 bills, Last year, it was a total of $30 million over 2 years, which means $21 million additional invested. And a lot of that is for education and training, anti-recidivism efforts to make sure that people are successful upon reentry. And so I will absolutely take a look at that. But give us your name and number so we can contact you back directly and maybe get some more specific information, but also to report to you what our findings are.
877-217-5757 and Billy and Jean Lafitte. Billy, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hi, John. I voted for you, and I had just had a question to ask you.
Thank you, Billy.
When you were campaigning, you said you wouldn't raise taxes. Why did you lie?
Yeah, that's an interesting question there, Billy. First of all, I absolutely reject the premise of the question. We were asked what we would do to address a budget deficit that was believed to be $600 million. That deficit turned into $2 billion the day that I walked into office. And so I worked with the legislature trying to figure out a way forward that would achieve the balanced budget as we're constitutionally obligated to do, but also in a balanced approach. So we did it with revenue, we did it with cuts, and we did it with savings. And everything that we did with respect to that required a 2/3 vote in the legislature. So together, I and the legislature took a course of action that has restored stability and sound financing to the state of Louisiana and has allowed us to move forward.
Larry in Baton Rouge. Larry, good afternoon. You're on Ask the Governor.
Hi, how you doing, Governor?
Larry, I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic job you did. Just want to congratulate you and the UCG on everything you guys did. General Honoré, be proud of you guys.
Thank you, Larry.
But my question is, I have two. One is, what is the current, I guess this is for Mr. Klein, what are we going to do about the east part of Plaquemines Parish? It is so vulnerable down there that if we see water coming, there is nothing. I mean, once you close the gate, and I understand evacuation is evacuation, but when you go, there's a possibility, and you know it's from Katrina, there's nothing left when you come back. There's got to be something substantially on the board to be done down there. And my second question is, what are we going to do about, I want to say, improving the hourly rate in Baton Rouge and the state?
So I guess I'll take the first part of that question. And so I think it's important to realize that, you know, the investment that the state have made in Plaquemines Parish over the last several years really puts Plaquemines Parish at the top of the list as far as a hurricane protection standpoint and a coastal restoration standpoint. So hurricane protection and coastal restoration go hand in hand. And so our levees are important, our floodgates are important, our pump stations are important. But just as important is recreating and restoring the natural environment that gives those storm protection systems cover. And so for every acre of land that you're creating in Plaquemines Parish, you are taking pressure off of your inland hurricane protection systems. So if you look at some of the investments that we're making on the east bank of Plaquemines Parish, not only do you have hurricane protection projects that the Corps of Engineers is leading, but you also have literally hundreds of millions of dollars. If you look at where the state of Louisiana is investing some of its BP oil spill settlement dollars, a majority of those are on the east bank of Plaquemines Parish to give you the protection on the east bank that you deserve. Mm-hmm. Similarly, on the west bank of Plaquemines Parish, if you look at the New Orleans to Venice hurricane protection levees, that's about $1.4 billion that the federal government invested in that area to protect Plaquemines Parish. And so we're working diligently on the state level to do every single thing we can for the residents of Plaquemines Parish, and that includes also St. Bernard Parish. There's a lot of synergies between the east bank of Plaquemines Parish and St. Bernard as well. So I'll be glad if you would love to contact us. We'd love to run through some of the priorities in that area that we have in that region.
And Governor, as you noted, the last increase in the minimum wage was on July 24th, 2009. Next week will be 10 years. It went from $7 are from $6.55 to $7.25, but 10 years is a long time to go without a raise.
Oh, it's too long. And look, it's not a meaningful minimum wage anymore. We need to do better. We're one of about 5 states without our own minimum wage. We're going to continue to fight for that and for a modest but meaningful increase that will mean that less kids are trapped in poverty. That people will be more adequately compensated for the work that they do. I just think it's the right thing to do, and it appears that the federal government is just out of the business. It doesn't look like there's any real movement or momentum to getting that done, and I think they're leaving it up to the states, and I think we would be wise to do what Arkansas did, and that is to undertake our own increases here as a state.
We're in the final minute. Karen, please be brief. Karen in Baton Rouge, you're on the air.
Hi, Governor Edwards. I
Hi,
just
Karen.
want to say hello, that I voted for you, although I am a Republican, but I really appreciate you reaching across the aisle and working with both sides of the legislature. My question is, it's something that's left over from the Jindal administration. I am a retired state employee. There was a strategy used that basically raided the trust fund for state employees to pay the state's debts.
Yeah, Karen, if I'm not mistaken, what you're talking about, there was a fund balance at the Office of Group Benefits. And quite frankly, I think the previous administration engineered a way to address ongoing budget issues in a way that actually drew down on that balance and actually increased what state workers and retirees have to pay as a result of that. I will tell you, we have done our very best to restore soundness. We brought back Mr. Teague to operate the Office of Group Benefits, and it is performing much, much better. And anyway, I appreciate your call, and thank you for serving state of Louisiana.
And thank you for calling, and Governor will be back next month. Until then, for J.C. Kane, I'm Jim Inkster. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned.